The idea of the living wage is basically that it should be a rate of compensation that pays a person an adequate amount of money to live a good life, not a sumptuous life of luxurious consumption, but a decent life. The living wage is typically, there are different ways of calculating it. We won't get into that, but it's meant to be an hourly wage, which is calculated to allow a person to be able to pay for housing, public transit, childcare, healthcare, including drug and dental, clothing, and maybe a little bit of going to a movie with the family once a month. But it's this idea of adequacy, and that's where it makes a fundamental departure from the idea of the minimum wage, or the reality, the policy of the minimum wage, which doesn't take into consideration anything to do with adequacy. Is it an adequate income to allow one to live? It's a floor. Minimum wages are a floor. And I used to work for the labor ministry in Canada, and we would have these very casual calculations, 2%, 5%, 10%, pick one, had nothing to do with whether or not that level of income allowed one to live an adequate life.
And yet, as a professor of economics myself, one of the ways that traditionally one evaluates an economic system is precisely what kind of life it does or does not deliver to the vast majority of its people.
Taking a broad look at most of the scholarly journals, business press, three main arguments when distilled tend to distinguish pro and anti-living wage arguments. I mean, amongst those, really at the core of the anti-living wage arguments are three broad claims. The first argues that if you raise minimum wages to a level approximating a living wage, this inevitably results in job losses, reduced business investment, decreased hours worked. A corollary to this is that, since the majority of minimum wage workers are apparently teenagers living at home and attending school, increasing the wage floor would only result in the consumption of luxury or extravagant goods. And the third really contends that increases to the minimum wage do little to significantly improve the lives of low-wage workers, nor are they really an effective anti-poverty tool. With regards to the first claim, I mean, predictions of job losses and slower economic growth haven't really panned out. On the contrary, we have evidence from the US, UK, and Canada that we detail in our current book, Rising Up, that found that, when one raises the wage floor to a level approximating minimum wages, has beneficial effects by countering, for example, weak demand, increasing productivity, reducing after-tax government redistribution, even increasing consumer purchasing power and higher employee retention. The second claim about most minimum wage workers just being teenagers and living at home is just not borne by the evidence. It follows from this argument that there's apparently no need for minimum wages to be livable, since minimum wage jobs are apparently a stepping stone to better employment. But in Canada, for example, as in the UK and to a somewhat lesser extent in the United States, nearly half of all minimum wage workers are over the age of 25, with few prospects for upward social or occupational mobility. There's some important contextual environments that also bear emphasizing, with recent immigrants, women, racialized persons disproportionately represented, and seniors actually being amongst the fastest growing groups among them. And finally, thirdly, contrary to claims that living wages are not an effective anti-poverty tool, we have research, again, from Canada, the United States, UK, that found that where living wages have been implemented, not only did the percentage of workers living in severe poverty diminish, but savings also increased. So while conservatives often raise this fear that mom and pop shops will be disproportionately impacted, the reality is that more than half of minimum wage workers are actually employed with businesses that have more than 500 employees.
It's striking to me, listening to you, that the employers have always had good reasons, don't you think, to not pay higher wages. I mean, any proposal, whether it were living wages or anything else, has always gotten them to hire people like me to generate the kinds of arguments you have now very successfully counted.